Ready to rock?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome back to Balanced, where each month Steve and I examine a philosophical topic through the lenses of reason, logic, and fairness. I'm Ben.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Balanced.
Well, Ben, so this episode I've been looking forward to.
Same.
And so what we have titled it is Evil Real? And we're gonna dig into that. And the first thing I'd ask, when we're talking about evil, and we're gonna get into it pretty deep here, but have you experienced evil?
Well, that question does kind of hinge on how we end up defining it, right? I mean,
Yeah, but I'm saying, just like right now, you would say, hey, first off, I believe, like, I sort of have, or haven't.
yes. So I've definitely been in situations where I've been at the mercy of someone with bad intentions. But, evil's a word that gets thrown around a lot in
It's a
this day and
strong,
age.
it's a strong word, right?
Sure. And with all the, it seems like every other week there's some mass shooting being perpetrated in this country, and you hear this word used all the time. I mean, have I ever experienced evil the way that, um, Allied soldiers in World War II going up against the Third Reich? You could say they experienced evil. No, of course not in my lifetime or generation. Have I ever been somewhere and witnessed a heinous act of violence against other people? No. Is being at the hands of an abusive parent, would that be considered evil? Is being bullied on the playground in grade school, by some kid that has no sympathy or empathy, is that evil? I don't know. I think it depends on how we end up defining it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. The first thing that I thought of when I put this question down, have you experienced evil? I actually thought hard for a minute, and I came to like this is interesting too, to me at least, a playground bullying scenario where, I was the new kid, and it was just really bad. And it's like, the feeling that you get that people would do this to you for no reason. It sort of felt like, but then I step back from that and I say, well, this is just some kid. If and now I'm an adult, I can say this was just some kid. I mean, he's just doing something stupid. He shouldn't do it, but, like, he's got his own life and parents, probably a totally well-adjusted adult now, years and years later. And it's, but then I go to a point, and it's interesting how, how sometimes things happen to people, and then people sort of repeat that behavior.
Sure.
I can think of a time years later when I was in high school, when I was part of a group of people that, bullied another person. Right. And it's almost like, to experience that and think about that, look back on it, how I felt. If I'm sitting here, the first thing I grab out of thin air of, have I ever experienced any, like, sort of the feeling of just evil, bad intentions. I think of that kid being bullied, and then I go to that point of being the bully. And so maybe that's experiencing it on both ends.
Yeah. I mean, the bully example is, again, depending on how we define it, I think you could make the case that a kid burning ants with a magnifying glass is evil in some way, from some perspective, perhaps the ants.
I guess I just wanted to get your initial thoughts. Like, do you think there actually is such a thing?
I actually don't. And this is something that I've thought about. I've had conversations about this before, because, again, this is a word that we see all the time pop up when terrible things happen. But I think, people can commit evil acts. There are evil things, but the idea of evil as a byproduct of a functioning hell, no, I can't. I don't buy that. And I don't buy that people do evil things because they are evil. I believe that there's no clinical diagnosis of, like, oh yeah, he's just evil. No, there's a reason someone has, whether it's psychopathy, or there are legitimate, actual scientific, psychological reasons why people commit and do evil things. Evil is just a word that we use to refer to these things. Like, no one has demons inside them that are making them do these things. That's not the world that we live in. That's not how the universe functions.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I sort of feel like there. I'm gonna be opposite of you here. I sort of feel like there is such a thing, and I don't know what I mean by that right now. And I guess we'll get to it, but like whether it's not like demons or anything like that, but like a state, like a current state of the way things are going on in a certain situation. I'd say that state could be maybe evil. Like there's like it's not doing well, but I think maybe as we define it, that won't sound like I'm saying something so crazy.
I mean, I don't think that's crazy. I just think that as you dig into any, you can take any situation, any state, even that, since you use that word, that people would look at and say, "Oh my God, what a horrible, evil thing." And there's many, many, many examples of this. I mean, you turn on the news any night of the week, and you can hear about acts of that could be labeled evil. But if you dig into any one of them, at the root, evil is never the actual answer. You know,
Yeah.
the real actual answer could be one of hundreds of things. We live in a complex society, and people are complex creatures with complex emotions. And the answer, if you dig far enough into any one particular event or situation, you're not going to find evil there.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. In at work, in one of the courses that I am working on, there is a course on customer service, and I know this doesn't seem like I'm making any sense here, but give it a second. So I say to the class, you're sitting at a restaurant, you want a hot meal, you ordered this meal that's hot. It's gonna, and it gets served to you when it's cold. And I said, is that bad customer service? And everyone's like, yeah, that's pretty bad. And so I say, well, is it bad customers? Is the cold food itself the reason, or what's the root cause of it? And people sort of, because that's what the course wants to get to, right? The root cause. And so I say, let's just take an example. And the food was cold. It got there cold. Why? And ask those whys, because when it was prepared, it sat too long before someone came to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then why? Well, because that person, the waiter or waitress, has way too many tables and is way behind today. Why? Because there weren't enough people scheduled today. Why? Because one woman came in for her shift today and quit. Why? Because the manager, who had been mistreating her and like sort of making passes at her and just being a jerk, was doing it again, and she had just had it, so she quit. So here in this example, it's just a simple example. Say, like, we just identified your cold food was because of a hostile work environment.
Sure.
And no one would put that together. People are like, what?
Yeah. Well, the
Like,
idea
sorry
that,
about the cold food, sir, but
right.
we've got a hostile work environment here. People would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I think maybe when you're saying evil, like the root cause of those things that we call evil doesn't come to a thing called evil. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. That you can drill into a situation with all the specificity that you want, and the actual answer will never be, "Oh, he's just evil. Just an
Yeah,
evil person, just doing evil things. He just wanted to do evil in the world." No, there's a reason why people make the choices they make. You know what I mean?
sure.
Even if it's there's a deficit in a person's psyche. So
So
evil's kind of a, I think, a catch-all term that we use. And there are certainly things that fit into that basket very neatly.
yeah,
I mean, you take one of the many mass shooting events that we have, any one of those, you could say that's an evil thing.
yeah,
Of course it is.
yeah.
But that's
So
not why.
so I decided from looking at this that, like you said, it's all going to come down to our definition. I have some definitions here of evil. I went to merriam-webster.com and tried look for the definition of evil, and the first definition is morally reprehensible, sinful, or wicked. I don't really like that they use that term sinful in there because that's bringing religion into it, but
Mm-hmm.
but morally reprehensible, sinful, or wicked. I think we understand that. The second one is something arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct. So, like, that's sort of what you said. Someone has bad character, they did something bad. Now, there's a reason for it, but evil arises. It's a state of being or a state of action or activity, I guess, that arises from someone doing something that they shouldn't do character wise.
Okay. The definition is a little broader than what I was imagining initially, because I was thinking of the word, like I said before, a byproduct of demonic influence or some mechanism of hell in the biblical story. And there's,
Sure.
Satan using people as marionettes to do his bidding. Like that idea, that's how I think of the word. But, actually, if it's something that applies to use this definition, actual or imputed bad character or conduct, well,
And,
that's a
and
that's a much broader definition.
yeah, and you use the word byproduct, and this uses the word arising from. And
Hmm.
so arising from is something that's sort of a byproduct, right? So
Yeah, and it comes back neatly to your idea that it's certainly at least a state.
yeah, so a state. So I thought to myself and said, let's define, if we're going to say evil, the opposite of evil generally is known. People are going to say it's good. So I said, look, I wanted to define good to see what is going to help us, right? And I went to dictionary.com. Why did I switch the dictionaries from Merriam-Webster to dictionary.com to define good? Because Merriam-Webster, the first basic thing, all it had is like of a favorable character or tendency, like good news, a good meal, right? Um, so I didn't think that was good, but dictionary.com comes to morally excellent, virtuous, righteous, pious. Now, one thing I notice here, the definitions, the Merriam-Webster, evil was morally reprehensible.
Yep.
And dictionary.com, good is morally excellent.
Hmm.
So seems like morals are a key here.
My next question is, how are we defining morals? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, we said evil was defined as morally reprehensible. So
Yep.
not
So
moral.
I've got the scale. I've got the
Yeah.
sliding scale.
And then good, morally excellent. So what morals do is, and I lean on my philosophy degree for this,
Please.
because we talked about this a lot. That was sort of my ethics and things of that nature was my concentration. So morals deal with what ought to be done in a situation. There's a situation and you have a decision to make, you have an action to take. What ought you do? So what is the proper thing to do?
Right.
So that's really when you're talking about morals. So it would be like, so morally reprehensible, someone's doing the improper thing. And let's take the bully incident, right? That's improper. You should not pick on some poor kid like that who doesn't have any friends or who's new to the area. Doesn't, just
Let's
because.
take let's take let's take the burning ants example,
Okay.
because
Okay.
I feel like with the bullying, and why I'm saying that, I feel like it's a mere pure example, because in bullying there's a lot of stuff, either social hierarchies at work and like a
Okay.
person's personal history. A kid burning ants with a magnifying glass is much simpler.
Okay. Okay. So burning ants, a living creature on the earth that has done nothing to you, to pass time or for mere enjoyment, to see what happens, to use a magnifying glass, to focus the energy of the sun and burn the ant to death. I do. Would you agree that's morally reprehensible?
I would say so.
I would agree with you. And so,
If for no other reason, then it ignores the sanctity of life.
yes, which I would think if we say what the right thing to do is to uphold the sanctity of life, in my opinion.
For sure.
So there's going to be a lot of this that, as we talk about morals and good and evil, comes down to like, well, in my opinion, for me, right? Um,
But I guess we should just say that, to take it a step further, there's a difference between, oh, I have ants in my kitchen. Let me put these traps down to try to resolve this issue of having these insects in my house and near my food, and just burning them with a magnifying glass for fun. Two totally
yes,
different things.
two totally different things. Although, both you could sit and think about it long enough and say, wow, I sort of wish I didn't have to do that.
Of course.
It's just sort of like I have this thing lately, probably over the past this probably, believe it or not, since we started doing these podcasts, like I get really upset when I see roadkill.
Hmm.
Like I'm like, this is an animal, it's a creature. We've done a podcast on animals, right? And just like it's just such a shame that this creature is just trying to cross the street because there's better food over there or whatever, right? For whatever reason. And
Yeah.
it just has to get just like run into by.
I know what you mean, and I'll just add to that that I think there's another layer there, which is that an animal being hit by a car in a way is like such a perversion of the natural order because humans in our ever evolving advancement have these cars that go 70 miles an hour where like that's not of the animal's world. Like you said, they're just trying to eat. I just want to go over. Oh, it looks like there's some good grass over there. Let me cross over there. But they're having to exist in a world that is filled with human conveniences, even when it's to their detriment. That's a deep dive on roadkill, I guess. But
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, oh, now we've put the animals in this, like, it's actually Frogger, right? For them. Remember the old video game?
of course,
So it's like now, hey, guess what? Every time that you might need to do better and do something simple that you need just to survive as you're just trying to innocently live your life. Now you have to be extra careful. It's like you're in a video game. You got to be careful. There's things that could kill you out there, that not just things that are part of the natural order, right? But
well, check this
um,
out. Since we're talking about morals and what's the right thing to do,
yeah,
there are places in the world where they design specifically green bridges that cross over major roads and highways specifically for animals. They get kind of funneled up over these raised green sections so they never
I
have to. Have you seen this before?
yeah, I've seen pictures, and I can't
No.
remember where it was, but it was like over like a, whether it was like not even a huge highway, but like, maybe a 4-lane thing, 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other. And like, it's almost like you see an overpass. It's interesting. The picture I saw, it was like almost like the road was going through a little valley. Like maybe they cut through a mountain, a little bit
Hmm.
to get that road through. And then they sort of made an overpass, but there's no street up there. It was just grass and
Yeah,
like
it
some
seems
trees and,
seems
brush.
seems better for everyone.
It does if it gets used. Same idea, I guess. They do some of these things in places where they'll raise up the oil pipelines, so like caribou or whatever can get under.
Hmm.
So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, yeah, that seems morally excellent to me, to
Yeah,
take the time as a society, as a country, as whoever's planning that, to say, hey, we should do this. Someone says, why? It's extra money. Who gives a crap? We should do this because of the animals. That's morally excellent.
that's morally excellent. And but there's also upside. Everyone driving in their car who doesn't have to worry about a deer jumping out in front of them, the animals themselves, people, other motorists not having to pass through carcass. I mean, it just seems like you could say, now we're getting into like, this is a whole other topic, but oh, we don't want to make that initial investment. It costs too much money to build the green bridge. But how much money are you saving? How much money is spent every year on automobile repair from
Yeah.
animals and deers getting hit? I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be huge.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. So
Another
morally,
example of how everything's connected.
yeah, more exactly. We could talk about one thing and end up talking about everything, right? Morally reprehensible, morally excellent, what ought to be done in a situation. So um, now I started leaning more on philosophy. So let me throw this at you. Um, uh, Immanuel Kant, German philosopher, lived from 1724 to 1804, which that was a long life back then. So
He lived 80 years
yeah,
in
yeah,
the 18th century. That's really good.
that's incredible, right? So, but that'll be nothing different than me living to 100, right? So,
You're on track.
yes, yes, absolutely. So he had a work called the grounding for the metaphysics of morals. So he's trying to saying like, hey, morals, what's the right thing to do? And he said like a metaphysics of morals, like how things work. There's got to be some sort of root rules, right, that we can lean upon. And he came up with what he called the categorical imperative. And although you can talk to hundreds of people who will word it a little bit differently here or there, basically, and I got this right out of the work because I own it. He said, as far as what one ought to do, like we're talking about morals, he said, act only according to the maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Now, one word in here that act according to the maxim, we don't really use that word much. So I got to pull the definition of that. And a maxim is basically a general truth, a fundamental principle, or a rule of conduct. So, and that's from Merriam-Webster.com. So that's what he says when he says a maxim. I know that's not something we usually hear that term, but so act in a way that you can will that it should become a universal law, and it would never be wrong. It would always be okay to do. What do you think about that?
That is a lot to digest. Hold on a second. I'm processing this. Um, to put it simply, what he's saying here is you should only take action that would also be good if everyone else took that action in every situation.
If everyone, anyone in a similar situation could do it. So, and again, remember, he's talking about the metaphysics of morals. So what ought to be done, what should be done in a certain situation.
Mhm.
So he's basically saying, listen, if you're in a conundrum, you've got to make a decision and do something. Um, you know, let's just, I don't know, say you see an old lady, 90-year-old woman walking down the street with a cane, and you're on the sidewalk, she's on the sidewalk, and she loses hold of the cane and falls down on the ground straight on her face. Like, he's like, okay, something, you've got a choice here, right? You could, ignore it. You could call an ambulance. You could jump over her, whatever, you've got a choice. And like, I think the choice I would make would be like to help her up and see if she's okay. Even if I'm headed to a meeting or somewhere I'm supposed to be and
Mhm.
I'm in a rush, stop what I'm doing, help her up and see if she's okay. And I think that for me, and the way he would test that, say, do you think that anyone in that situation, that should be a universal law, people in that situation, are you comfortable saying, everyone should do that? Everyone should do that.
Yeah.
And that's what he meant. Now that doesn't mean it's easy to come up with the way to act, but he was saying, hey, if we're going to get into the metaphysics, the tools, the basic building blocks of how are we going to know what's the moral right thing to do, he said, if you act according to the rule where you could at the same time will that should be a universal law for everybody, he said, then that is going to be what you ought to do.
So it's essentially a moral compass. It points the way.
Yes. And of course we could get into some dicey situations where you could say, okay, I'm in a situation, what should I do here? Think about the thing that we were talking about. We were talking about this some months ago, about you had the that sort of philosophical problem with the train tracks or whatever. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yep. We have the train is there's a split rail and there's a train coming up to the split and you're at the switch and the train is on a track with seven people tied to it. And if you pull the lever, it switches to the track that has one person on it.
Yeah.
And what is the morally correct thing?
So it's the morally correct thing. If we get a situation like that, it's not so easy to apply that rule, right? Because you could have a 3-hour discussion how I should act where I could will that it would be a universal law
Yeah.
that anyone in this situation would do the same thing. Now, that I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm sure Kant did not think it was easy either, but he thought that was something that would help guide you, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to say the problem that we're referring to for people that are listening and want to look this up, the commonly referred to as the trolley problem.
Yeah. And so that's basically in my memory, in at least in my philosophical studies, that generally was brought up in terms of like utilitarianism, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. So of course, a utilitarian in utilitarianism, they're like, well, seven people live versus and one person dies versus seven people die and one person lives. Well, seven people living is better than one person living. So
I don't even
it's
know if that's because there's so many variables. Like, what if that one person?
sure. What if that one person is going to grow up to be the next like horrible Stalin, right? Or I mean, you could drill down. So, and frankly, I'm not a fan of utilitarianism.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah,
at
because
all.
of course the other way to look at that is to say, well, by standing here and taking no action, these seven people are going to die, but I'm not killing them. If
Yeah,
I pull the lever to switch the trolley to the other track where one person dies, I, I took that action. I'm culpable in that. So, yeah, it's an interesting thought exercise because it forces upon the thinker so many questions.
yeah. So yeah, and it does, and uh, there's some other examples that I ran into it when actually I was studying Kant in the categorical imperative. So let's just say, you know, really quick, not to get too deep into the weeds, but to make the point, let's say there's a terrorist who has put a nuclear bomb in a city, a couple states away. Then you're in a room, and let's say you can't, like, you're not Superman, you can't beat the terrorist. You're in a room, and the terrorist is. It's almost like one of these like crazy villains in one of these like Batman movies or something, right? Just a crazy person. So the person says, okay, so either there's a baby in a crib in this room with you, smother the baby to death with your bare hands, or, and if you don't, I am going to press this button and the nuclear bomb goes off and a million people die in this city. There's certain things, not all of these things aside, for a categorical imperative, Kant would say just the act of smothering a baby is wrong. Like,
Yeah, right.
and say like, I'm not doing it because it's wrong in all cases. And that's a really easy way to wrap my brain around it. This smothering a baby with your bare hands, wrong in all cases. And someone might say, well, but this case, Steve, the utilitarian person, in this case, it's right. And I'm like, no, like that categorical imperative is like, no, it's not right. It's wrong in all cases. Universal law, don't smother babies, right? With your bare hands. And for me, now some people won't agree with me on that, but for me, I'm like, yep, I can get along with that.
Hmm.
I'm not doing it.
I think of the humans in prehistory who did have to do that exact thing in order to secure their survival and the survival of
Yeah.
other kids. So it's just interesting that comes to mind because, of course, I get it. It's essentially a much more extreme version of the trolley problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that example specifically, it's like, yeah, if that's the rule, I mean, I guess like in those cases in for Neanderthals who had to make that difficult choice, it's just a different lens, I guess.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. So it gets dicey, and we're talking about good and evil. That gets dicey. So okay. So then, according to Kant, if we're going to just go with him for a minute, the categorical imperative. Now that we understand it, like, so then what is evil? Evil would be the wrong thing to do. You're doing something wrong. Is that evil? Is that all there is to it? It's just right and wrong. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, maybe it's more about intention.
Okay.
Maybe intention is a bigger part of the problem, so to speak. I mean, the intention of a terrorist holding you in a room and threatening to blow up a city unless you smother a baby, those intentions are very different from a prehistoric cave woman
Sure.
uh, smothering a baby so that she herself would have enough food, or the other kids in the brood. I don't know. Maybe it's more. In fact, I think the more I think about it, intention would have to be a huge part of the equation, because there are all matter of horrible mistakes that could be made that would result in the loss of human life, where the person committing the act, right, thought in that moment for whatever reason they were doing the right thing. Totally different intentions. Totally same situation, totally different intentions.
Yeah, I mean, did they think they were doing the right thing, or did they think they're doing the best thing, or did they think they were doing what they had to do?
Hmm.
So it's, right, wrong, good, bad. I don't know if it's just all about that. I think intention's a big thing, like you said. So, but you think it's a little bit more than just right and wrong.
Well, I'm just saying I'm trying to account for nuance, and
Yeah.
there's there's so much nuance out there.
Yeah.
That's why these questions are so difficult. I mean, that's why this is a conversation that's worth having, because it's unlikely that you'll ever find yourself in a situation where you need to decide whether to pull a lever to save 7 people, or do nothing and save one person. We are confronted with these types of decisions, big and small, on a daily basis. What is the right thing to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So if there's something more, maybe it's more than intention. What about good, evil, an independent supernatural power? Isn't that what the like religious folks would have us believe?
That goodness is something that is like prescribed to us from on high.
Yeah, and that badness or evil is something that is like, hey, like The Exorcist, and there's a new movie coming out with an exorcism I just saw. I think it's Russell Crowe was on it or something.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was called like the Vatican's exorcism, or the Pope's, or something. But I just saw the trailer for it, and it looks like it'll, you know, be one of those movies that, are will freak you out a little bit just because of the.
I guess we are past due for a what is it? An exorcism movie, exorcism
Yeah.
based movie. But I ironically, the movies like that are made to be scary, to scare you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the Catholic Church fighting against demonic possession with this thing. And what's funny about that is, like, that's a real thing. Like, they actually do exorcisms on people in an attempt
Yes.
to rid them, which is mind blowing. But what I was going to say is that you don't even need demons and exorcism to make the Catholic Church scary.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, that's fine. I agree. So yeah, I mean, religion would have us think that it's independent of us. And it's funny, there's people who are religious people that I know, they're like, oh, those movies, that's not like, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We go back to my Clorox example. Like, hey, if you're believe in that, you have to believe in it all. You can't, that's like going to the cashier at the grocery store and buying a bottle of Clorox and saying, hey, I just want to buy the part that cleans and disinfects. I do not want to buy the part of this that would kill me or my children if we drank it.
Yeah.
And the cashier's like, sorry, bro, can't do it. You take it off the shelf, you take the whole thing off the shelf.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and one last thing on religion. I mean, if we're talking about an examination of morals and moral right and wrong, as I've said on other episodes, the Bible, in my view, is a poor framework for morality. I mean, that is not as we talked about. If if
Yeah.
if if there is a creator and he was going to give us a book, I just have a very hard time believing it would be that book.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I hear you. We have discussed that. So that being said, maybe we talk about the forces of evil, evil, the demons, the terrible things. If it's not that, are those forces of evil that people refer to just something that we conjure up culturally to explain that feeling, or that wrong, that intention when someone does something wrong or bad?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think people, it's it's almost universal because it's something that, from the religious perspective, it's a story about, the religious stories are stories about good and evil. You have
Yep.
God that represents pure goodness, and like he's trying to do good and do the best he can. And in instances where he fails to do the best he can, fails to protect people, when you have a giant tsunami kill thousands of people, that's the devil doing his work. He's um he's trying to do the worst he can, and they're battling it out.
So yeah, maybe that's just something people put together so they could explain all the good and bad things that happen in the world.
It's so much more elegant, though, to think that the universe is just a random place full of random events. And while we've said everything is connected and interrelated, isn't it more elegant to think like all those thousands of people died in a tsunami, not because God was busy over here doing this and the devil made the waters well up and wipe out a bunch of people because he's wicked, but that we live on a planet, there's geological explanations, we sometimes have tsunamis, and
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So I went to look for some more modern interpretations. I was looking at wikipedia.com for good and evil. And good, like basically some of these more, and it's interesting how much information comes up on a platform like Wikipedia when you just look up like good, right? It's talking about life, charity, continuity, happiness, love, justice, right? So just all things that are sort of like, we feel like, hey, these are right, these are proper, these are pleasant things that, you know, sort of that we experience. And then for evil, it specifically listed conscious deliberate wrongdoing, which is, there's the intention you talked about.
yeah.
Discrimination designed to harm others. Humiliation, this one really got to me. Humiliation of people designed to diminish their psychological needs and dignity. I thought directly of that book I recently read, Ordinary Men, about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, does humiliation of people designed to diminish their psychological needs and dignity, and then it leads to destructiveness, and then this one, acts of unnecessary or indiscriminate violence. I think we could agree those are bad, right?
Yeah, and I actually love this as a definition of evil. But again, I think the word evil just functions as a catch-all, and that there are very complicated and nuanced actual answers underneath, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Sort of wonder. Like, is there something that's just a state that's what we're talking about? A state of I was thinking about this when I was putting this together. Is there a state of not goodness, right? Sort of, because it's sort of easy to wrap our heads around what's good,
Mm-hmm.
more so than evil. So
Maybe it's and I think this is what you're saying, but I'll use the analogy of light. You people think of light in terms of light and dark. If they're, it's
yeah,
either light or dark, but actually there is only light, and
yes,
and darkness is the absence of light. So there is no, like, darkness is just nothing. And so maybe that's a parallel. Maybe what we call evil is just the absence of goodness.
it feels like when I was putting these slides together, you were right there with me, because I went to another philosopher and you just said what he says.
Hmm.
He said it's a simple equation. This is Benedict de Spinoza, 1632 to 1677. Now that's a more probably realistic lifespan for back then, right?
A 17th century Dutch philosopher.
Yes, yes. And he said, good. This is his definition. Good, that which we certainly know is useful to us. And then look, whether you agree with that or not, but like, look how he defines evil. That which we certainly know hinders us from possessing anything that is good. So that's, like you said, light or the lack of light
Mm-hmm.
is the dark, and good or the lack of good or something that hinders good is the evil, according to him. It's like simple math. Does that make sense? Could it just be the absence of goodness?
I mean, in some ways, it doesn't. I was going to say it doesn't account for the nuance, but um, I guess you have to ask because there's a philosophy. You're probably familiar with this, and I'm not gonna state it properly, but bear with me. Tell me if you've heard of this. The idea that we live in the best possible version of the world because there's it's kind of a balancing act between the people that would do evil or do harm and the people who are trying to do good. And there's some equilibrium that exists. And I think that, it evolves over time. That's why, like,
There's a balance, and it's basically almost like you think the yin and yang idea, but uh, about how the world is like overall, not just with a specific, you know,
yeah, like would you say, for example, that the world there was more evil in the world in the Middle Ages?
I don't know. It seems like there was.
It seems like there was. It seems like there was definitely more. It was just a more difficult, more violent, scarier time in like human history and the world. As we like evolve and as we build on, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and we pass things down, and we're hopefully moving the world, pushing the world in the right direction. I think.
Yeah. So like right now where we're at is the best that we can be, although we'll only get better,
Well,
is
I
the
think
idea.
that's the hope, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's the hope. Let's go to the old lady who fallen on her face. And I just thinking of this example, like I said categorically, we should help her up, see if she's okay. And it seems like it would be hard to argue against that. But so then if you're like, that's the good thing to do, help her up, see if she's okay, and get her help if she needs some. And or the lack of that, just ignoring it, stepping over her, not doing anything, laughing. It's just not doing the good thing.
Hmm.
Is that
Well, not doing the good thing. I
is
think
that enough for evil?
not doing the good thing.
Yeah,
Well, there's. I think you might have said this. Sorry. There's a difference between not doing the good thing, which would be for whatever reason. If I'm in a rush, I have somewhere to be. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see that, or just step over her and keep on going. That's different than pulling out your phone and recording a video and laughing in her face and posting it on social media.
sure, sure. And how about this? This is I'm looking at Spinoza, that which we certainly know hinders us from possessing anything that is good. So this hindrance idea, like if someone is it, would you say it's evil? Like if I'm like, oh, this old lady fell down, I'm going to help her up, and some guy's like, no, don't help her up. I'm not going to let you. So don't do it. I want to film this. This is golden. I'm going to put it on my social media. You call that evil? Like I'm actually trying to do the good and you're hindering it. Someone is like, no, no, I'm going to stop that.
Probably not evil. Me personally, probably not evil. I would say that person is suffering some moral bankruptcy. The person
so
that's.
so maybe not evil, but definitely wrong.
Yeah, right.
And if evil ends up being wrong, just that which you ought not to do, the
Yeah,
opposite of what you ought to do,
yeah.
that sure would make life easy, wouldn't
Now,
it?
if in a situation where this person went up to the old lady, knocked her down, and then prevented you from helping her up, then I would say now you're crossing into
Evil.
evil territory.
Yeah. Yeah. So purposely getting rid of goodness, or stopping or hindering goodness, purposely creating a situation that is not good,
Yeah, I like that.
purposely
Actually,
creating a situation that is not good. This is the bully. So you can say, no, the bully is not evil in and of himself as a human being, but the state that he has created by purposely creating a situation which is not good. Maybe that's it.
yeah,
I'm glad this is recorded because I probably wouldn't remember this later.
that's all right. No, I like that.
Yeah. So maybe that, and there's your intention, that you were like, wow, there's got to be some intention. Like I'm purposely doing it, purposely. And I think that could stand on its own, even if you're like, yeah, but there's a reason the person would purposely do it, because they've got issues, they've got a problem, they have a past, and they've been through other experience, but still they're creating a state that is not good, purposely creating a state that is not good.
Hmm.
It's that's wrong, man.
Yeah. On some level, for some reason, they personally are benefiting from or getting some pleasure from the suffering of others. You're firmly in the realm of evil there.
Yeah. So purposefulness is a big part of this. So intention, like you said.
Yeah.
All right. So, so here's my problem with the whole thing of good and evil. The good guy, bad guy conundrum, I call it. So if we both think we're acting righteously, and you're stopping me from doing what I want to do because you think you're right, I mean, is it just subjective, good and evil, right and wrong? Like, let's say, we're neighbors, and you know, we've got a dispute about where the actual property line was. Like, you think you've got 3 extra feet on your side, and I think, no, that's mine. And
Hmm.
we're like feuding, and like, to you, you're like, this guy is a jerk. I don't know what he's doing, right? And then to me, I'm like, this my neighbor's terrible. He's right. But like both of them and their family, and I'm sure both these guys talk to their wives, these neighbors, and they're like, God, they're such jerks. They're such bad people. They're trying to take our land. But on
Yeah.
the other side, they believe the same exact thing.
Yeah, it's funny. As I've said on other episodes, we are all the heroes of our own story, right? In
Yeah.
in every situation that a person goes into.
I don't
uh,
know. I mean, because I really don't think. I think people believe what they believe. But do you think there are people who are like,
well, what
like,
stopped me in my tracks there was I'm thinking of the mass shooter that goes into a school and
yeah.
opens fire. I mean, this person obviously
But listen to
knows.
this though. Is this mass shooter like this? The last one that we saw and we discussed a little bit was the one in Nashville, right? And like, was that person planning this in her apartment or whatever, like the old, like you see on cartoons, the evil like, I'm going to do this? Or was that person like, these people have wronged me, they mistreated me all my life, they're trying to hold me and other people who are different down, and I feel like I have to fight back? Like, is it more something like that? Probably. I don't know.
Well,
I
it's
can't get into the
it's
mind of someone.
yeah, and it's hard to make the case because what you're talking about is misdirected righteousness,
Yes.
where she really felt and believed that there was a legitimate reason to take this action. But once you know, once you go into a school and you're gunning down innocent kids, you've you've departed. There is no rational way to um, to justify that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, there's so many examples you could bring up. So the point of view perspective thing is, that's part of the reason when I say this is my problem. That's part of the thing that I think there is an evil. Like when you say, "Oh, I don't know if there is or not," and I'm like, there is something that's independent, not like a thing or a person or a personality, but there's something independent, like Kant was trying to say, the metaphysics of morals. We can get down to the tools and find general rules like we could in math to test things against and say they're good, say they're bad, right or wrong. I feel like because you, just like you said, that person, they crossed that line, they might think somehow that they were doing it righteously, but once they get there and they're doing that wrong thing, purposely shooting those children, doing things that there's just no argument that anyone could put together where that comes out, and you're like, yep, I get it, it's right. You just can't put it together. So that's why I feel like there is something, I don't know what it is, or but there's something independent. So examples of evil, I'm sure you're going to have some examples, but I wanted to put some examples where people, like you said, and you just brought it, like they saw that somehow the line got crossed somewhere, whether or not the people think they were doing the right thing, the line got crossed. um and I believe I could say this, it's not, oh, in Steve's opinion the line got crossed. I think I can say this Immanuel Kant style, categorically, the line got crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of the movie that we've discussed before, The Cove.
Yep.
I'm thinking of all of the books and stories I've read about the Holocaust.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about, um, the Gulag Archipelago, the Gulags, that I read that, and that was just so brutally.
You read that book fairly recently, because I know you've caught up on
Yes.
the gulags a couple times last couple episodes.
Yeah, but it's just like what,
It is fascinating.
and just, I don't care what, if they thought they were right, if we can give them, oh well, from their perspective, no, it doesn't matter what their perspective was. Somewhere they crossed the line during those, in those things that I just listed. And it can't be argued against. I believe anyone who does argue against it and tries to, that argument will fail.
Hmm.
What about you? Examples?
You give good examples here. The Cove is interesting because, you know, I was thinking just when you mentioned that perhaps a barometer is the reaction to something of people who are not, are those fishermen evil because of what they're doing there? They think that what they're doing is no different from, people who charter a fishing boat when they're on vacation and catch a sea bass.
Yeah.
They're just trying to make a living, and they're doing it with these dolphins. But then, like, people like you and me and thousands of other people, I'm sure, saw that movie and were completely repulsed by it. And there's something in there. There's a clue in there that what you're doing, like you said, that you've departed any realm of goodness, when the majority of people will look at a situation and be like, "Oh my God, that's horrible."
That's, yeah, it's almost like what, people call that sort of thing, like, around here where I live in, the Washington metropolitan area, the Washington Post test, right? They say, like, hey, if you're doing something, let's say at your house, or would you be fine with that being on the front page of the Washington Post? And
Yeah.
people are like, no. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
That is also a really interesting, but that connects really nicely to this idea of lightness. It's like, if you shine a light on something, right? How comfortable would we be with sunlight hitting this situation?
Yeah.
And if the answer is not at all, then yeah, there's something wrong.
And that's where I go to examples of evil for the Cove, especially the lengths and the measures that were taken by those fishermen in that specific town where that was shot, to stop outsiders from filming
Yeah.
and capture and finding out exactly what was going on. That didn't pass any Washington Post test, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the sunlight test, or whatever you want to call it, didn't
Right.
pass. They knew, and you have to step back if there's something like that. And someone has to question, why would we hide this? If this was just okay, why wouldn't we be like, yeah, come along? This is, our culture.
Yep. It's an indicator of intention. That's why people will charter, openly charter a fishing boat, go out, post pictures of them. Look at this fish I caught on my vacation. That's
Yeah.
that's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those people aren't putting that on their Facebook page or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right. Exactly.
So there you go. I mean, there's some examples. Now, so I thought about this, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but then our in the United States, our food production, the treatment of animals in our food production plants,
Mm-hmm.
um, where they take pigs in and,
It
stab them and bleed them out. Is that just, oh well, we've got the right to do it, or are we like those fishermen?
Yeah, you're asking some great questions. And, what happens in American slaughterhouses and American meat farms and that industry in general is shrouded in darkness. There's a reason for that. I think,
Yeah.
as I've said before on the episode where we talked about animals and food, it's very easy to go to the grocery store and buy a pack of bacon. Uh, it's very easy to rationalize that, to justify that when you are not the one plunging the knife into the pig's neck, right? Or you don't have to you don't have to be where this is happening. I think that most people would find that experience repulsive.
Yeah. And I recently read a book. I don't have the name of it off the top of my head, but where they had done studies, and like huge percentage of people working in those situations, in those kill houses, actually doing that dirty work, serious needs serious counseling, and or are found just to be like to get over those experiences and have PTSD from it,
Mhm.
and end up quitting the jobs. And those that are found not to, and just to like it, go along, like sociopaths.
Was this book called Slaughterhouse? A
Um,
shocking story of
no,
greed.
yeah, Our Symphony with Animals by Aisha Ankar. She's a medical doctor, actually.
Oh.
Um, very eye-opening book about a lot of things. And so you're right. What we do is just wrong. And in fact, there was recently a news article, or not article, but a report I heard probably a month ago. And they said, expect the price of bacon to be going up. And people were like, they were looking into it. There's a new law. I think it was in California that was talking about the amount of square footage that a, a mother pig that is being, raising piglets for food production, the square footage that they were living in had to be increased by like 6 times, because
Hmm.
they were basically in a cage they couldn't move. They were
Hmm.
artificially inseminated and just wait for piglets to come out. And they actually were showing behaviors. And actually, that book that I just mentioned, there's some about that in there too, where this lady went to see these things and showing certain behaviors that animals would show if they're actually being driven crazy,
Hmm.
not ever being able to walk backwards, forward, anywhere, standing
Mhm.
up their whole life, like just
Mhm.
really terrible treatment, right? So, yeah, the food treatment, people are trying to hide that. They don't want that out in the open. Actually, California is trying to do some things to change it. And if the price of bacon needs to go up, well, because they need more space for that, and they can do less pig breeding because of this, the humanity that we need to show now, or the increased amount of humanity, then it's right. But would you say we're evil for this?
I mean, yeah, how could you it'd be difficult to make a case otherwise.
Purposely creating a situation that is not good when there are better alternatives. So
Available.
yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think that makes it. And now I'm thinking what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, and if I'm going to be all upset about it, right?
Well, that's such a big topic, and the opinions vary wildly, of course, but like, as we talked about in that other episode, we both eat meat. I mean, we are participating in it as consumers, but that doesn't
That
you know that
doesn't make it right.
yeah,
Just because,
and it doesn't mean that we can't acknowledge that it's not right.
yeah. Do you think there can be a real objective evilness and goodness independent of us, like a state, that state that I was talking about, that state of someone is purposely creating a situation, a state of events, a state of being that is not good, purposely doing it?
Yeah, I really like this idea of uh, the evil label being applied to states. That to me makes more sense because, as I said, a person, an action, there is certainly a scientific explanation for why people do the things they do. But it's entirely possible to find yourself in a set of circumstances where evil is unfolding around you.
Yeah, so that little kid that you're talking about with the magnifying glass, you come up to him, let's say he's your nephew, cousin, your own son, and you say, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop. What you're doing is evil." Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I could
I
see
mean,
like,
it makes sense to me. What you're
yeah,
doing. So you've created evil. You've created an evil situation in a state of evilness don't do that. And then the kid says, why? And say, well, because this is life, whether or not they're big and have the same thoughts and feelings that we do. We don't know those things. But the bottom line is, life is special in all forms, and we should let them be. Now, I understand that we might have to keep them out of our pantry where we keep our food, because we don't want them in the food and there to be dirtiness and get a disease, because we don't want that. So sometimes we have to take steps, but just for the just purposely doing that just for fun,
Yeah.
just for sport, that's not good.
And I could see, a kid, because kids have a way of interacting with the world where it's like there's so many experiences that are new and are like this kind of path of discovery, like being a young boy, especially out in nature and doing experiments and seeing how things work and what happens if I do this. I get all that, but I feel like the light bulb moment in this situation where you go up to your son and say, "Hey, what you're doing is evil," and he's like, "What do you mean? Why is that evil?" And then you explain like all the things you just said, and that these like how would you feel if something way bigger than you came up and melted your legs off with sunlight? It's like
Yeah,
then
yeah,
then 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 it's like there's the perspective. It's like, oh, like I didn't even the kid wasn't even thinking about it in those terms. Like I'm just sitting here with my magnifying glass, these ants are walking around, I was just seeing what would happen. But then you imagine that you're the ant,
yeah,
and you would hope that this creature that's towering over you, that has all the power in the world over you, could wipe out your entire existence or not. And you would really hope that they would not.
yeah, yeah. Just for the sport of it, for the fun of it, for something to do, right? Like, people should not, if you're driving down the road, you see a rabbit on the road, you should not aim for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you should slow down, and hopefully I do that all the time, where like in my neighborhood, there's a squirrel running across. I'm like, whoa, like, what am I going to gun it? Right? No, that's horrible, right? Purposefully doing that, right? Imagine, there are probably people who do that, man.
Oh, I'm sure.
All right. So final thoughts here. I think we've talked about this. I think we did come up with,
I do feel I agree with you. I think we made some headway. I feel like for me personally, I came into this discussion feeling like evil is just a word that we use. It's a holdover from a time when people were a lot more religious and didn't understand the world, and evil was like something that you could slap on bad people, bad acts.
yeah,
But no, I think you successfully convinced me that while a person, there's reasons behind evil deeds that have nothing to do with evil, but there are definitely states that are
yeah.
evil. I'm with you there.
So, once again, we have solved the great problems of the world.
Wouldn't go that far, but hopefully got some gears turning.
No, I think so, and I think that's important. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and of course, if people have an idea for a topic they'd like to hear us discuss, drop us a line. You can email us at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com. I check it once a day just to see what we're getting in there, and we'd love to hear from you. Can't promise I'll respond or immediately, but I'll respond as soon as I can if anyone reaches out. So please continue to do that.
Balanced is produced by myself and Steve. Our music is by Four Giants. You can check them out on Bandcamp or wherever you stream music. If you enjoyed this discussion and you'd like to hear more balanced conversations, hit subscribe or follow. We would really appreciate it. As always, I'm Ben.
And I'm Steve.
And we are balanced.